2. Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. It was certainly a bad news final on Sunday as the Cleveland Browns came in and sort of slobber-knocked the Ravens around, especially on the defensive side. Luke Jones is our chemo Sabi here, but Luke, before it all began, our partner in crime, and I know you've gotten to know Coach Billick over the last 10 years. Did you ever meet Coach Billick when he was actually the coach? Like, I've never really, you've had dinner with Brian in various continents and different places and whatnot, and you know Brian now, but Brian, the coach, like little Luke Jones on January 28th of 2001, very different than the Luke that's in the locker room chasing down Earl Thomas and Brandon Williams after an altercation, right?
Right. I mean, I wouldn't say I was little. I mean, I guess I was 16 in 1999, Brian Billick's first year. So, but yeah, I met the coach a couple times. More so getting his autograph in Westminster when I was a junior, senior in high school.
Oh, you have a fanboy picture with Brian?
I don't know if
post that. How can you not post that on the week he's going to the Ring of Honor?
I don't think I do, but I'll have to look at that. But my best friend Mike might be the better one to ask about that.
He's the handler.
Maybe we got to, because we would go to training camp together. We would go to games.
He's
together.
your archivist.
Yeah, exactly. He's the one who took more pictures. So I'll have to dig into that a little bit. But I just had very brief interactions, once or twice, maybe 3 times over the years. So that's what's kind of interesting from my perspective. I've gotten to know Brian a little bit. I mean, I don't know Brian incredibly well, not as well as you, but I've gotten to know him a little bit and broken bread and talked to him and certainly had discussions on and off the record, so to speak. But that's always been kind of the interesting time of when I started covering training camp. 2009, it was Harbaugh's second year. I mean, that was still the wound was very fresh as far as Brian being let go and moving on from his tenure and it being a new era of Ravens football. But he was always someone that I had such respect for, and I understood why the Ravens made the move at the time. I can't say that I strongly disagreed with it or anything like that. I think some change was a good thing, and clearly it was a good thing because it worked out well, and John Harbaugh's still the coach all these years later. But I think anyone who is objective, anyone appreciative of the Super Bowl 35 team and just the identity. I mean, the Ravens the first 3 years, they were still the Browns dressed in purple. I mean, let's just call a spade a spade. I mean, it wasn't, people were excited about Ray Lewis, but this was still a baseball city. This was still a baseball town. The Orioles were 96, 97, they were in the playoffs.
Well, even in 98 when they stunk, it was such a thud for the new Bill. I mean, I'll never forget David Modell stretched out on that training table after the Steelers beat the Ravens in the first game. That meant so much, and there was all that. Yeah. And that was still Ted, right? And Jim Harbaugh that year, and how bad they played that year against the Jaguars. I remember getting run out of the gym.
I remember that Jaguars game. Who was it? Was it Roosevelt Potts, was it, that did something in that? Anyway, they got their butts kicked in that game.
They were losing like 38-7 at halftime or something, as I remember. It was terrible.
It was ugly. So when Brian came in and everyone knew who he was, coming from Minnesota, and what Randall Cunningham and Randy Moss and Chris Carter and company had done in 98, I mean, there was a lot of excitement about that. And he was brash. I mean, he was bold. He was a little arrogant. I mean, he had that persona. He had that mindset. That,
by the way, I was wrong. It was 42-13 at halftime. I just went through this year. That was that wasn't even like the famous Jimmy Smith game, was it? No.
No.
That wasn't the famous Jimmy Smith game.
Yeah, Jimmy Smith had the big game in 2000.
All right, so it was 42-7. Right before halftime.
Yeah, it was terrible.
It was brutal. Yeah, right, and that's what Ravens football was when Brian showed up. I want to point that out.
Exactly. It was, hey, we have 2 really good young players in Jonathan Ogden and Ray Lewis, and some others that have some promise, but that was about it.
Matt Stover made field goals too.
Yeah. Matt Stover was one of the better kickers in the league. Yeah, so it was clear that they had a long way to go, but when Brian came in, I mean, things changed. And I even heard some of your conversations last week with some of the former Ravens players and coaches. I think people recognized that the defense had some talent and was at least starting to move in the right direction, you would think, because of how young they were, because of how talented guys like Ray and Jamie Sharper and Peter Boulware and Dwayne Starks in 1998 coming in. I mean, it's not as though the cupboard was bare, but it was clear that a little bit of an attitude transplant was in order, and Brian brought that. And the Ravens took that and ran with one of the greatest defenses of all time. So it's all that appreciation that I have for him as being the leader of that team and changing the identity of this football team. As a fan, now all these years later, it was very much a case of him being in the Ring of Honor long overdue. So good to see that, and I think that was another layer to the disappointment of Sunday's game. You had Brian and so many different former Ravens players, former defensive players, who set such a high standard here, and to see the defense perform in that way, that just added a little extra layer of disappointment but certainly doesn't dampen what was a great day for Brian Billick and his family. And
it got a little dusty. I mean, and I'll be honest with you, the introductions happened, and I've talked to so many players talked to me on Saturday, and, I did some drinking, I did some eating, I did some walking, I did some talking. I was spotted all over town with all sorts of people because we were just texting back and forth, and I was chasing guys down, and some guys went east, some guys went to the fight at the casino. We wound up down at Ruth's Chris with Jack Del Rio, and everybody talked about Ray's dance. And they're like, we've never been in the stadium. How about this? We've never been in a home game where Ray hasn't danced. So, they're like, what's it going to be like? Like, what do they do before the games? Like, literally everybody said that. And I watched them come out, and I watched Earl Thomas do his knee thing or whatever that thing was, and there's no Suggs. And then Brian Billick brought the trophy out. Yeah. And I was like, I wasn't ready for that, Luke. I mean, psychologically, emotionally, I got a little spent. I'll be honest, the first set of downs, I was a little messed up. I was a little like, my wife's like, are you all right? I say, I'm not watching the game right now. I'm just thinking about Billick carrying that trophy around in here. That's an image that I don't really... other than him holding it up in Tampa or something, that's not something Brian does. And the first thing I thought was, is that the pirated trophy that I gave him that's behind him on the set, or is that the real one? Then I saw it was the real one. And then the game started, and, then the halftime thing was nice and sort of brief and all of that. I'm a little disappointed they didn't go with Screaming Like a Banshee with the spear speech when he was holding the trophy up. But I thought if there's anything that ever comes out of that tunnel that's not Ray Lewis, literally, because we've all seen Ray Lewis, what's going to come out of that tunnel? Brian Billick holding the silver trophy up? It's pretty cool. That was a moment. It really was a moment.
That was a nice touch. It really was. I mean, they've always, this is, I don't want to say always, but the last couple years when they've introduced this legend of the game concept, which I think is a really cool idea. I think it's a nice way to provide those nods to the past as the Ravens certainly now moving into this new era with Lamar Jackson and company. But so I figured he would be announced in that way, but how they've typically done it, I think last year, then they had the torch with the purple smoke. This year, they've
changed the music completely, right? Like, I like Hot in Here. Tony Pashos texted me at 10 in the morning the song Hot in Here. I'm not kidding you. He Spotified it to me. I'm not lying, because that's what they think of when they hear that song. They think of Ray Lewis. They think of that energy. And these are guys who played the game, made money, and went off to other places, and played in other places, and played in other organizations. And now there's not when they come back, it's not Jimi Hendrix, and it's not the music of John Modell, and it's not even the marching band sitting in the seats anymore. So, for all the alums, even the purple jacketed guys, they come back and they see the franchise changing and the stadium changing and the escalators and the music's change and the scoreboard. Times change, things change, but for the next group, there better be something to hang your hat on that's not 530 yards of offense, right?
Sure. And I want to be clear about this. Change is good. Look, I love U2 and Where the Streets Have No Name coming out of the tunnel, but they've been doing that for 20 years. I mean, I think it's okay to change things up. I think it's okay to have some new traditions and change up the sound and the look of things. But going back to your point, it's still neat to see Brian Billick come out there holding the Super Bowl 35 Lombardi Trophy. I mean, that's pretty special.
I tweeted, can we do that every week? I mean, if you can't have Ray Lewis, give me that. Give me a 35er or a 47 guy coming back and holding up a trophy. You know what I mean?
I mean, have
let Haloti know how to hold the trophy up. I mean, screw that shield. We got trophies around here.
Billick, Ed Reed, Ray Lewis. When Suggs is retired,
you got 8 games and you have 106 people minus a few alums who could come out in any week and hold the trophy up, literally. Let Jimmy Smith, when his career's over, hold the 47. To me, holding up Lombardi trophies as we come out, that's why we play. They can't do that in Kansas City. They can't do that in Cleveland, There are places they can't do that.
Right. I mean, that's why everyone's invested in this. I mean, look, that shouldn't be the only thing that warrants satisfaction and warrants having joy. I mean, certainly you want to enjoy the journey because there's only been 2 of them in the history of the Ravens, but I would like to think most Ravens fans have gotten way more joy than just those 2 specific days. But yeah, that's the end goal. That's why, as Bill Parcells would say, that's why you lift all those weights, right? I mean, that's why you put the work in. So it's pretty cool, but I think as far as some of the new traditions and stuff like that, or new, I don't want to say traditions because they're not traditions yet, but new music, new entrants, that's okay. That's all right to change things up. And you're hoping that one day, sooner rather than later, Lamar Jackson coming out of the tunnel is going to be way more exciting than any offensive player that came out in the past. And you hope that that's something that probably isn't going to ever come to the level of Ray Lewis.
But can he dance?
But, can it come close, Can he dance? Yeah, I mean, I think Lamar, based on the way that he runs, I'm guessing Lamar can dance a little bit. I don't think that's in question. But my point is, it's still neat to have some new things being done, but a very cool wrinkle to Billick being put in the Ring of Honor on Sunday where he's carrying the trophy when he was announced. That was pretty neat, no question about it.
All right, Luke Jones is here. All of our WNST and enduring coverage here brought to you by all of our sponsors. I haven't hooked up my purple lava lamp. I apologize, Court. I saw Court on Friday night. He and his beautiful wife down at Maritime Magic at Living Classrooms. Flowers around me and our lava lamp on the set can be yours. They're a click away. Just go to sporticulture.com. It's local. Buy them, send them, ship them anywhere. You can even send your Steelers friends some Steelers. Maybe they can send some burial flowers if we put the Steelers into the away this week. Who knows? It's Pittsburgh week around here. Sporticulture, flowers for every occasion. Everyone here on the Lee Tessier team hotline. I love saying that because I ran into Lee's buddies the other night. I didn't run into Lee at the Maritime Magic, but everybody comes up and says, hey, you know Lee. Yeah, I know Lee. How do you know Lee? I know Lee through leukemia. Lee Tessier team, Lee Tessier Real Estate, can give you an instant cash offer in your home or get your whole home sold guaranteed. Give them a call, 410-638-9555, or find them at leetessier.com. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. The waffle sandwiches are now available at all the Royal Farms. I stop by for the gas. I stop by for the fried chicken. I stop by for the Western fries. Occasionally, I go for a pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, but only when I'm in the mood for Cherry Garcia or Chunky Monkey. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. Make sure you get the app on your phone. You'll get the points when you pump your gas, and you'll get stuff for free. Cole Roofing, sponsor of our community and charity series. They've been there 100 years now. Don't let it goof on your roof. If you have a corporate space, they do big stuff, and they even have an energy company there, Gordian Energy, to assess your ability to make dough on your roof. Let your roof take care of your heating, your air conditioning, your energy needs. Cole Roofing and Gordian Energy. Find them at Cole Roofing. Luke, for you, onto the field and onto the game, we have talked about the Brandon Williams, Earl Thomas situation. We've talked about 530 yards allowed on this defense and the defensive problems. We have not talked a lot, although we're going to talk to Nick Boyle up at Adams Jeep Aberdeen this week about a lot of things. We haven't talked a lot about the offense and the effort against the Browns. Good, not great. Field goals, field position, couldn't get the ball back. I mean, it's hard when your defense can't get off the field to get your offense going sometimes, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was a big part of it in the first half. Think about it. I mean, the Browns, I think, had the ball for about close to 18 minutes, so it's not as though the Ravens had a ton of opportunities. But you do look at that first half, first drive, really torpedoed by a sack of Lamar Jackson on second down, set up third and long. They ran a draw, which was kind of a weird play call right off the bat, considering how aggressive they were against Kansas City last week. Then Cleveland had the long touchdown drive. A second drive of the first quarter, it was a sack that torpedoed it at the end again. Then you get to the third drive, which was the first one of the second quarter. You have the third down play where Chris Moore's wide open. Lamar Jackson, not a great pass, but Chris Moore's got to get his feet in bounds there. I mean, if you're an NFL wide receiver and he's a guy that some people have wanted to see get more opportunities, you got to get your feet in there. So bad play on both ends right there. But you just kind of look down the list. They score a touchdown then finally, and that was it for the first half. So a couple pass protection breakdowns, there were a couple drops in there. Not a great throw to Chris Moore, but Chris Moore was so wide open, dude. You got to position your feet to get yourself in bounds. So that was kind of the story of the first half. I mean, they didn't have a ton of opportunities. They moved the ball okay, but some self-inflicted things that happened there. Then you get to the second half, and they moved the ball pretty darn well. I mean, it's not as though Cleveland just completely shut them down or anything like that. They get the field goal on the first drive. Kind of a bad pass from Lamar to Marquise Brown to kind of end that. But they get a field goal to tie the game. You're thinking, okay, they're fine. Well, we know what happened on the defensive side, but then I think you just go back to that Mark Ingram fumble. I mean, it's a 17-10 game at that point, midway through the third quarter. They had moved the ball well. They were approaching the red zone, and as good as Mark Ingram has been, and I don't want to look, they weren't going to go through the whole season without committing a turnover. The law of averages suggested that was going to happen.
I tweeted, I'm like, I forgot you could fumble. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Literally, they did put the ball on the ground and fell on it, right? And with the exchange problems that they had last year, and there hasn't been as much exchange because he's thrown the ball more, right? Like, literally, there haven't been as many sort of bumper car crashes. I mean, this offense doesn't look like a bumper car crash the way it looked for 8 weeks last year, and maybe to its own detriment. It was more successful when it was a bumper car crash, right?
Yeah. I mean,
but Lamar's also not getting beaten up. I mean, we're not seeing Lamar getting his head taken off. We saw more of Marlon Humphrey getting his head taken off on Sunday than we saw Lamar. Literally.
Yeah, definitely. But that fumble was just, that was a bad time for that to happen. Cleveland marches down the field and scores. So then you're just at a point in the fourth quarter where
it was a game tilter. It tilted the field. Yeah.
Yeah, you're playing behind two scores. I mean, you're behind the eight ball. Even if you're Kansas City in that spot, that's not where you want to be. That's never where you want to be. Even teams that are capable of coming back. And look, I mean, to their credit, they march down the field. Jackson throws the touchdown to Mark Andrews. They go for two with being aggressive again, kind of that similar to the scenario when they were down 11 last week of why you go for two there. They get it, and they're a touchdown away from taking the lead if your defense gets a stop. And, 88 yards, Nick Chubb run later, they're down by two scores again. So from that point, it was just about you're chasing the scoreboard, and they went for it on fourth down. Andrews and Jackson weren't on the same page. So, look, was the offense particularly good on Sunday? No. Were they terrible? No. I mean, it was just, as I described it to you, it was kind of meh. It was kind of okay. It was fine. But when your defense is awful, that's not going to be a winning combination. So clearly you saw the frustration from Mark Andrews on the sideline after that fourth down incompletion. You certainly saw frustration from Lamar Jackson sitting on the bench and in the post-game, his comments. I mean, so they weren't happy with how they played, and they throw the two picks late in the game when at that point your win probability is so low, you got to try to make something happen. I mean, it's not as though you can be methodical and march down the field 14 plays. You're just going to take up too much time. So they clearly were frustrated. They clearly could have been better, but 18 points until that last drive that was complete garbage time. I mean, I'm not putting a whole lot of, I like the fact that they can continue to compete, but I don't think there's anything to really glean out of that. They weren't good enough. So bad defense and mediocre offense, that's going to add up to a loss.
Well, I mean, the defensive
99
line's an
times out of
issue,
100.
right? I mean, if your front seven has some stoutness against the run and can hold an edge and Lamar wants to run, but if he gets through your level, you got trouble, right? I mean,
Yep.
and the stepping out of bounds, the fancy steps, his thought now to look for the sideline is the way to get out. There were a couple of plays, a couple times he took off where last year he would have cut it in. And he's cut it out. And that comes unnaturally to him and probably with a lot of coaching from not only Urban, but everybody in the organization saying, dude, we need you back in the huddle the next play. Don't be a hero here.
Sure. And what's so tough about it on Sunday, I mean, I felt this way. I felt this way watching them with the Kansas City game. You don't want him to run too much for the reason you just spelled out, but boy, it sure seems like their offense really gets going when Lamar takes off and picks up 12 yards, picks up 16 yards, at some point in time. And I know you don't want him running 26 times. I agree with that. I'm not saying that you want your offense to just...
But you don't want him 2-2 either.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. I mean, it's just good things tend to happen, and it seems like their running game just really kicks into another gear when Lamar takes off and picks up 11 yards. I mean, there were a couple instances on Sunday where it looked like he was going to be either sacked or stopped for a loss of 2, and before you know it, he gets the edge and he's juking someone and he picks up 12 yards. I mean, it really is amazing to watch him in that way. But in the big picture, you have to have some discretion in how often you do that. And I mean, the good thing is he's taken major strides as a passer. I mean, yeah, he missed some throws on Sunday. He wasn't great by any stretch of the imagination, but he also is the first Ravens quarterback to have 10 touchdown passes through his first 4 games. So that's including Vinny Testaverde early on. That's including all the Joe Flacco years. So I know the standard isn't incredibly high at the quarterback position for this franchise, but it does speak to the improvement he's made. But I think the offense as a whole, and we should have known this all along, scoring 59 points against the Miami Dolphins wasn't going to suddenly mean the Ravens were going to hang 40 on everyone every single week. I think we all understood this was a young quarterback, a young team, an offensive line that has a couple weak spots, although I think their offensive line overall has played well. Maybe not their best effort in pass protection on Sunday against a really good front, as you pointed out, but I think there's certainly some more room for improvement, and there have been some hiccups, but I think by and large you have to be really encouraged by what you've seen from Lamar Jackson. And the final numbers on Sunday probably not indicative of how he really played. I mean, you look at it, 247 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks. That really wasn't reflective of what the day was, because let's face it, I mean, in the first half they ran the ball pretty well, but didn't make a lot of plays in the passing game. It was a lot of short sideline throws. I think Cleveland copied some of the elements of what Kansas City did, taking away the deep ball, and it forced the Ravens to be a little more patient, have to be a little more fine in what they were trying to do, and they only had 7 points in the first half. So even though they didn't have the ball a lot, when you're in that position, it kind of sets up for you to not have the best day offensively. And then we saw the turnovers in the second half that hurt them on the offensive side of the ball for sure.
He is Luke Jones. He is Luke at WNST.net. We'll be out in Owings Mills all week long. Don't forget, it is Pittsburgh week around here. And if the Ravens have led you to drink lottery, beer, booze, and the best prices in Baltimore are at King Discount Liquors. Get on out to Rosedale, give the King a ring. Check out my new commercial with Johnny Bev. I mean, if people were actually watching the Orioles games, they probably would have seen my balls commercial by now. And the King All-Stars, King Discount Liquors in Rosedale. Compass Point, I'm wearing my Compass Point hat. The weather is good. Going to be in the 90s this week. Go hit the golf ball. 36 beautiful holes in Pasadena, always close to home. They can still book an event for you this fall. They can book a spring event. They've got night golf coming up. They've got turkey shoot stuff coming up in November. Robert Kennedy's going to be here doing buckets and birds this week. Compass Point and Compass Point Golf down in Pasadena, or the Dina, as they say. Also, our friends at Charles Nisanoff & Sons, Sydney, taking care of my wife's wedding band. Her wedding ring just sort of ripped in two. about a year ago, and Sydney said, I can put that back together for you, no problem, bring it in here. So that's what we did. Jewelry, watches, engagement rings, custom designs. I've known Sydney for 2 decades. Found some old pictures of Sydney back in the day with like Jared Johnson and Will Demps and John, all these people I saw over the weekend. 410-661-5050, and you can find them out on the web at charlesnewsonoff.com. And when you're driving around 695 right there at Perry Parkway, just look off to the right, and it says Charles Newsonoff & Sons. That's where Sydney is. Stop by and see him, 410-661-5050. Hey, if you're in Highlandtown, see Andy. He's the guy's got the hot dogs up his arm. Legendary. Everybody knows Andy. When I give Andy a shout-out on Facebook, everybody's like, I went to school with Andy. I know I ate hot dogs. I got chili. I ate breakfast there. As seen on the network with Food Network with Guy Fieri. Check out their beef brisket burgers. Also hit him up for breakfast. Do what I do. Go down Eastern Avenue, pull over, park, go around and say chili, cheese, and maybe some fries with gravy to go. There is a debate about French fries and gravy first being served in Baltimore G&A. That's possible because G&A's been there longer than anybody else. Luke is here. Luke, I'd sell my soul for a hot dog and a number 22 bus out to 33rd Street for one more day after. I know you would too. But on to Pittsburgh here this week and where we are and where the Ravens are and sort of this I don't want to say the season's on the brink, but we're certainly in a different space than we were 10 days ago, just psychologically on the backside of Brandon Williams and Earl Thomas and who's getting healthy and when is Jimmy Smith coming. There's a lot of mysteries going on here about a lot of this, and even Mark Andrews and his injury that feels like it's now lingering past the quarter pole. We're at the quarter pole, and they're 2-2. They're an 8-8 football team right now, right, as we would see it.
Yeah, and I think what makes Sunday so painful, first of all, when we were going into the season, looking at the schedule, as we always do, I think most people looked at it and said, okay, Miami, win. Arizona, win. Kansas City, probably a loss, and it turned out to be that way. I think Sunday was one of those games where you said, okay, get a win. You protect home field against a team that probably is at least going to be in the mix, whether you were drinking the brown and orange Kool-Aid or not on the Cleveland Browns. I think everyone acknowledged that they were a better football team than they've been in a long, long time, really, maybe since they came back into the NFL in 1999. Certainly the talent was there. But that was a game that I think many people pointed to and said, you got to win that one because you got to win your home games in the AFC North. If you want to be a team that goes 4-2, 5-1 in the division and win the division and make the playoffs. So right off the bat, you look at it from that big picture standpoint and say, well, many people thought they'd probably be 3-1. They're 2-2. So there's that. There's the sense of, and I wrote about this late last week at WNST.net. This was an opportunity for the Ravens to take put a stranglehold on this division. You would have had 2 games in hand, 2 games up on Cleveland with a tiebreaker game in hand. You would have had 3 games up on, a winless team in the AFC North. Would have been 2 games up on the Monday night winner, and it's just...
Well, it's hard to believe Pittsburgh's coming and getting anybody right now, but they can beat you this week.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
I don't think they're going to be the team with 10 wins that we have to chase this year, right? But they're the team that can give you your 8th loss.
Right. They're the team that I still think they can be the team that I thought Cincinnati would be, and I said this throughout the spring and summer, I thought the Bengals, at that point in time, this is before the Roethlisberger injury or knowing that the Ravens defense would be poor through the first quarter of the season, etc., but I thought Cincinnati would be the team that would be just talented enough to mess things up for the other teams in the division. I think Pittsburgh can still play that kind of role, and I think, especially playing at Heinz Field, and look, for any Ravens fan that's going to sit here and say, oh, they have Mason Rudolph, I'll give you 2 words. No, I'll give you 2 names. Ryan Mallett and Charlie Batch in recent years are guys that have beaten, Batch's case coming into Baltimore, beating the Ravens in 2012. In Ryan Mallett's case, a playoff-bound Steelers team coming into Baltimore week 16, and Ryan Mallett beat him. So any Ravens fan that's going to sit here after Sunday's loss and have bravado about going to play the Steelers because it's Mason Rudolph and Ben Roethlisberger's not there, you better revisit that pretty quickly. I mean, have you watched this defense? So it's so different. And I think I made this comment to you at some point in the press box on Sunday, but I have no idea what to expect from this Ravens-Steelers game. It's almost like it's a clean slate. Think about it. No Roethlisberger, no Joe Flacco, no Terrell Suggs, which is...
Well, you have Tomlin and Harbaugh, and that's it, right?
Yeah,
literally.
No Antonio Brown. I mean, Lamar Jackson played a handful of snaps in the two Steelers games last year. Flacco was a starter for both. So it's a really different dynamic. And that's not to say the Ravens-Steelers rivalry is going to die, although it's certainly strange to be thinking about playing a 1 o'clock kick at Heinz Field when all the games going back to 2013 was the last time a Ravens-Steelers game in Pittsburgh not nationally televised. So it's a different dynamic there, but who knows what to expect here. I mean, I'd like to think the Ravens get off the mat and lick their wounds a little bit and then go there and take care of business, but who the heck knows when you're talking about some of the issues that they have, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So I think Pittsburgh certainly has talent elsewhere beyond the quarterback position, but you also have to point to no Antonio Brown, no Le'Veon Bell. I mean, as much as you might be glad to be rid of the headaches, they're good players. They're guys who made a lot of plays for you over the years. So you have to replace them in the same way we're talking about the Ravens not replacing C.J. Mosley or Eric Weddle or Terrell Suggs. I mean, some of the growing pains involved there. So it's definitely going to be interesting. And to your point, I think it's premature for must-win territory, but you go to Pittsburgh on Sunday and lose to Mason Rudolph and the Steelers, then I think the thoughts of this team being on the cusp of being there with New England and Kansas City, like we were thinking possibly 2 weeks ago, that goes out the window, and then you're starting to wonder, well, what's it going to take to win this division? 9 wins? Because I'm still not buying that Cleveland's a juggernaut, Matt, all of a sudden, just because of how they played Sunday. Then you're really watching the scoreboard and you're looking at the schedule and saying, okay, which of these games are going to be wins? And, playing at the Rams later and Houston and San Francisco coming to Baltimore, that looks a little bit different than you might have thought. I mean, you just start breaking down every week and you say, well, are they going to win that one? Is that a game they could lose? And it's just a much different expectation than 2 weeks ago where, I don't know, I'd say if you polled a lot of Ravens fans, they were thinking maybe they can be 12-4 or 11-5.
Oh, I thought we were getting in the car to drive to Pittsburgh on Sunday morning, up and back. We'd be 3-1. Maybe the Steelers would be 0-4. I just thought like this. I didn't think it was going to be easy. I just thought these 3 weeks really represented blue water for them.
Yeah.
And here's the problem. They're not very good. I mean,
right.
As it's assembled, I mean, you brought up 25th ranked defense, all this. At the quarter poll, they played the Dolphins and the Cardinals.
Who are also winless, by the way.
Right, and so's Joe Flacco, by the way. And they've played the Chiefs, and they've played now the Browns, who were this juggernaut that weren't. They got their ass kicked by Tennessee. That team didn't show up on Sunday, that's for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's definitely, it's disconcerting. There's concern. I don't know if the panic button, I think, it's one thing to be 0-3 and panicking, like Pittsburgh and Cincinnati was going into week 4. That's a different element. I mean, 2-2 is, in the big picture, not that big of a deal as long as you correct some of the issues that led to 2-2. But I think you just looked at these 3 weeks against AFC North opponents. To me, it was just such an opportunity to put some distance between yourself and the rest of the division. Even the years the Ravens won the Super Bowl, I mean, this has not been a franchise that has run away with things. I mean, the only year that you can say that the Baltimore Ravens were truly elite in the regular season and just looked so great and ran away from everyone else was when? 2006, the Steve McNair first year. They went 13-3, and Cincinnati and Pittsburgh were 8-8. The Browns were 4-12. I mean, the Ravens had that division wrapped up by, mid-November, practically speaking. So
they just haven't been in that. 2000 they had the long winning streak to rally, and they were a team that was in disarray and hadn't scored a touchdown in 5 straight games, and the defense was playing great, but the offense was so bad. And 2012, we know what happened there with the losing streak in December. So this is not a team that's been in that opportunity very many times to run away with something, and you just look at how it's set up. I mean, the Browns had looked so mediocre over the first 3 weeks of the season, and no Ben Roethlisberger, and the Bengals looking like the worst version of the Bengals, and you're thinking, wow, you could win 3 straight here and be 5-1 with a trip to Seattle that's not going to be easy before your bye week. I mean, you're 5-2 at the bye, then boy, you're feeling really good about yourself. Understanding there's still some challenging games to go in November and December, but now when you drop that game to Cleveland in the fashion that they did, this wasn't a losing on a fluke play. I mean, they got destroyed in the second half of that football game. I mean, they got their butts kicked. It was a close game, and you could even say it was a one-score game in the fourth quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter. But their defense got its ass kicked in the second half. I mean, that's uncharted territory for playing at home against a non-Tom Brady, non-Peyton Manning kind of outfit. So it makes you reevaluate everything. It makes you kind of come up for air and say, wow, what's going on here? So I think they can correct some of these issues at the very least, but this is just it's concerning to lose in the way that they did on Sunday, and now you kind of revisit every other game and say, okay, it's not reason for complete full-blown panic, but they've got to get some things fixed here, because they clearly can't just show up and expect a win playing like they did on Sunday. That much is for sure.
He is Luke Jones. He is Luke at WNST.net. And together we're out doing the morning newspaper. All that's brought to you by our friends at Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. We got Baltimore Positive happening all over Baltimore this week. Let's tell you about Wednesday. I'm not going to be in Owings Mills Wednesday because I'm going to be spending it with John Sarbanes at Fadley's having crab cakes this Wednesday along with Don Moeller. Thursday, it is Ben Cardin in a doubleheader along with the group that's bringing Baltimore homecoming here. Some really key stuff. Brandon Scott's out on Baltimore Positive this week. He is our Baltimore City Council president as well as a mayoral candidate. And we also spent an hour chatting with Calvin Ball, Howard County executive, last week out at State Fair. And I rushed down to accost John Angelos. We haven't even talked about John Angelos and the Orioles staying here as long as Fort McHenry is standing over her shores over the Inner Harbor. I'll get to my Orioles stuff. I'm going to be writing a blog at WNST.net about the Orioles and the Orioles' future this week. Also, trying to brush up my Coach Billick thoughts, especially after he brought the trophy out. I am writing an ode to Coach Billick here at some point before the week is over. So some blogging, some writing. I'm trying not to spend Saturday night or Sunday night in Pittsburgh, trying to do Pittsburgh the way God meant for me to do it, to go in and to get the hell out. That's the plan. All week long, we're in the BuyAToyota.com audio vault, 24 hours a day for your listening pleasure. We got a lot of great guests here from Pittsburgh in the aftermath of the Cincinnati game, some cleanup here on the Cleveland game as well this week, some Baltimore Positive, and probably a few more 35 alums that I went out and soaked in the evening on Saturday. We had so much fun on Saturday, and then Sunday sucked so bad. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and all over your morning newspaper and Baltimore Positive and WNST.net, where we never stop talking Baltimore sports.